Hello, beautiful souls. Today we are going to take you on a time lapse. We are working in the greenhouse to get another raised bed in. And if we time this just right, we're going to be able to plant some things for the fall and into the winter harvest. So we'll take you around. Whoop. And this is where we're going. The whole family is happily pitching in today to help build and play. The outside U-shaped raised beds were completed and planted about 3 months ago, and we are currently in mid-July working on the interior raised beds. Our aisleways will be 4 feet wide, and the beds are 2 feet high in hopes of creating a space that's wheelchair accessible and child friendly, because we do host children on our farm every week through nature schools, summer camps, and we're hoping to host family fun and forage days. You can hear fans running in these videos. Jared has installed a thermostat that automatically turns the fans on in the high tunnel when the temperatures exceed 85 degrees Fahrenheit. It's currently July in North Carolina, so we have also installed an exterior 60% shade cloth to keep the temperatures down. But it still gets hot. Sometimes I think it would have been a better option to put a tarp over the bed, fill it with cool water, jump in, grab a beer, call it a day for health and safety reasons. But he kept on working. He even took a few days vacation from his outside the farm job so that we could begin planting for the fall garden. At the base of these beds, you'll notice we have added some decomposing wood from around the property in hopes of creating a partial hugelkultur system. Our hopes is that this wood will decompose to improve the soil, it'll add nutrients, and improve the water holding capacity within these garden beds. Just a note, when you do this yourself, you want to avoid black walnut for its juglone toxicity and hard rot resistant wood such as black locust. Our soil locally on the farm is acidic and either full sand or hard clay. Here at the location of the high tunnel, it is hard clay. It is not the medium of healthy soil to grow healthy plants. So we have had 2 dump truck deliveries of raised bed soil mixtures from Brooks Contractors. Their compost is garden gold. The mixture includes 50% mature compost, 25% sand, and 25% clay. In past beds, we have mixed in peat moss and vermiculite into this mixture, but having already spent $1,800 on just the soil deliveries, our budget was maxed out. This mixture, however, has created very healthy plants, as you can see from growing in the outer U-shaped garden beds. I am at market today with our daughter, and Jared is continuing work on the greenhouse raised beds. Jared is lining up the pipes here using a string line. Next, he will walk you through his installation process from start to finish. For the metal material that we used, you can order it to size, which is what we did, but we still ended up cutting a foot off because we chose to widen the paths. You can see the plants overhanging, and it just made it difficult for us to walk between the garden beds. And I can't imagine having community members or people in a wheelchair trying to get through an even shorter aisleway.
Good morning, everybody. Shauna had asked me to do a quick video for our raised garden beds because we've had so many questions. I'm not normally the one in front of camera, so you'll have to bear with me as I struggle through this. So we made our beds with 1 1/4 inch aluminum conduit, also called EMT. It's this stuff right here. I got them in 10-foot pieces and just cut them into 3, so they're about 40 inches in length, and then they're driven into the ground about 1 foot, a little less. I lined the pipes up, drove them into the ground so that 25 1/4 or 25 1/2 inches of pipe was exposed. And then we used this, which is a galvanized aluminum roofing. And we use that to line the inside of the pipes. And you want the metal on the inside of the pipe so that way when the soil goes into the garden bed, the pressure of the soil pushing out will keep the metal rigid, and that the metal will just push up against the pipes to hold it there. There's actually only 1 screw in each pipe for the metal, just to hold it in place. And then once we dumped all the dirt in, the dirt holds it there. You want as little holes as you can get in the galvanized roofing, because every time you poke a hole in there, you remove the galvanization and it will make it rust. So the screw holes are actually above the soil, underneath the boards, so that way they're not exposed to the water, so they won't rust as easily or as readily. So this is looking pretty ragged, but to drive the pipes into the ground, you don't want to use a T-post driver, or you don't want to just hit the top of the pipe with a sledgehammer, because if you do, you'll mushroom out the top of the pipe and you won't be able to get your metal up nice and tight to it, and you won't be able to get your boards on there. So I just took a block of wood. It looks like junk now because I used it to do this whole thing, and I put a hole in it, and I put that on top of my pipe, and I hit this, and that keeps the pipe from mushrooming out. And when I did that, when I first started, I didn't put anything inside this hole, and the very first pipe I did got itself stuck inside the wood because it just embedded itself in the wood, and I ended up having to pull the whole pipe out of the ground and redo it. So what I did is I actually put a washer inside of there that was big enough and thick enough that it wouldn't be damaged over the course of doing this whole thing. I actually used a hole saw to start. I used an old hole saw in there, and that fit over the pipe nicely. And then when that wore out, I used a washer. And I just put that on top of the pipe, beat it with a sledgehammer, and drove it into the ground. And like I said, I drove the pipe in so there was 25 1/2 or so inches, because this piece of metal is 24. So after I drove the pipes in, I lined the inside of the pipes with the metal, as you can see. And then I used some aluminum flashing to do the corners. Now, this is a 10-inch, it comes in a 10-inch roll, and I think I bought 2 25-foot rolls. And I had a friend that had a metal brake, and we just bent them. So they're 24 inches tall, and they're 5 inches on either side, and they're just bent at 90 degrees. So once I got the metal in all the way around, I just took this and screwed this a couple times into the corners. And I only did the outside corners. You could do the inside too, I suppose, and that might help with some rigidity. But I felt that the outside was plenty strong enough. And I only did 4 screws per side. I could probably do a close-up of that later. So once I had that done, I did my top plates. And they're just a 2x6 pine. So when we first started to design these beds, we wanted to do it in a way where lumber would be the minimum. And we did that for a couple different reasons, but the primary was cost. With lumber prices being so high, to do this whole thing in cedar would have cost us thousands of dollars to frame these out in 2x6 cedars all the way around in the corners. I think I wrote it up and it was like $8,000 in lumber to do it with cedar. We wouldn't be able to do it with pine in North Carolina because the termites here are so bad, and the wood would have rotted and they would have got into it within the first year. So we needed to come up with a way that could be metal and rot resistant. We didn't want to use the cedar because it was so expensive, so we tried to come up with a way that was just metal and nothing else. But then we decided that I wanted to have some place to sit or lean over that was comfortable and not an edge of metal. So we drove the pipes, lined them, and then we used, I don't know if you could see this or not. So this one going this way connects the pipes from end to end, from one side to the other. So from this pipe to the other pipe. And then that board does the same thing. And the reason for that is it keeps the pipes from splaying out when you add the soil. So if you just ran these boards straight all the way across, as soon as you put dirt in the bed, it's going to just mushroom out like that. So I made it so that these boards go across and they hold the pipes rigid, and then these ones are fastened to those ones in this corner here. The way I did that is I just used a little piece of 1x2 furring strip, and there's a piece of furring strip underneath on both sides, and then they're toe-nailed in, and that holds everything pretty strong. So now the only thing that is screwed in is I have the galvanized metal screwed into the pipe once, and then these boards are screwed into the pipe once, and that's it. And they're strong enough that I can get up here and jump around. They're not weak at all. The other thing I did is before I put these boards on the underside I cut a 1/4 inch dado, or a 1/4 inch slot, to accept the metal. So when this metal is sitting up like this, the board sits on top, it goes into the board 1/4 inch, and that keeps the metal from moving around when you add the dirt. So another reason why we decided to do this, I don't know if you can see, but yeah, you can't really see that, but if you look at some of these pipes, you see this pipe here, then you have your board, and then it goes across to that pipe. And that will allow us in the future to do another hoop from side to side so that we can do high tunnels within our high tunnel. And over here in the tomatoes, the pipes are actually in there. You can't see them because the tomatoes are so bushy. But when it starts to get cold, we'll be able to do hoops inside of our high tunnel for farther season extension. So the reason, again, we did this is to reduce the amount of lumber, to reduce cost, and to get the lumber off of the ground because of termites in our area. And then we wanted to be able to do hoops within hoops for a hoop house or trellising. So we've accomplished all of that with these beds. So I hope that answers some of your questions. And let me just do a little bit of a walk around here. Okay, so here's the corners. The corners are just, like I said, they're the aluminum flashing on a 10-inch roll, and they're just screwed into the galvanized metal a couple times. The pipes are driven down in the ground about 1 foot, and they extend over the top edge of the metal by 1 1/4 inch. So that way, when you do your boards, your pipe sticks out of the board and is flush. On the inside boards, again, keep the metal from splaying apart as they're connected like this. Now you could run your board continuous and then take this board and toenail it in here. But I felt for the most amount of strength for the soil compression to keep the boards from splaying, is I didn't want to depend on a couple screws, because I have no idea how much pressure this soil adds, but I'm assuming it's a lot. So we decided to do it this way. And then the pipes are screwed into the boards. There you go. There's one screw to screw the pipe into the board. And then there's just some 1x2 furring strips to hold everything together and keep it rigid. Of course, everything's toenailed and tacked. And for a long time, I was considering using metal. I wanted to use more metal and do some kind of a metal bracket on the corners. But for cost purposes, I just went with the furring strips, because we had a whole bunch of that from when we built the tunnel. And I guess eventually I'll probably end up replacing these as the boards dry and warp. I'll probably end up unscrewing these and putting on something more rigid to hold everything together a little bit better. But for right now, it seems like it's working out great. Now I do say that for 2 of these beds, I used 1.5 inch pipe, because our Big Blue store ran out of 1.25 inch pipe because of the times that we're in, and they couldn't get them in stock. So 2 of the beds, here and here, I used 1.5 inch pipe. Now on my first short bed, so this one, I've made 4. On this one, I tried to reduce the material cost by spacing. I'm really spinning you around a lot, I'm sorry. I wanted to reduce the spacing from pipe to pipe. So these pipes, this one and this one, they're a little bit more than 6 feet apart. And when I put the soil in, I don't know if you can see this or not. Not really. But when I put the soil in, the metal bowed out, and it's not significant, but it is enough. It kind of drew everything together and it bowed the metal out. So 6 foot spacing on these pipes is a little bit too much. So I reduced it to 4 feet, and that's originally what it was. So these pipes, those are 4 feet apart. And when they're spaced 4 feet apart or less, the metal doesn't bow, and that's what we were going for. So I did the one bed with 6 foot spacing on those metal pipes, and I would not recommend it. So the rest of them are long beds, and all the short beds, those pipes are 4 feet apart or less. I hope that helps and answers your questions.
This greenhouse would not be possible without the help of our community. Many, many thanks going out. NRCS helped fund the exterior of the greenhouse, and then the interior beds, those were helped fund through people across the world on our Donors Choose, as well as goat cuddlers who came out to the farm this spring. So many, many thanks to all of you. This has been about just under a $15,000 investment, and we have been able to have about half of that funded. So we are so thankful and so grateful and so excited to be able to share this space with the community in the years to come. Thank you for following along with our journey, and even if you are not local, hopefully this can help inspire you to build some beautiful raised beds for yourself.